Alrighty, guys. Let me just get this finalized up here. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, what am I looking for? Alrighty, looks like we are live and in person. Maybe adjust my camera a little bit here. Let's see if that's any better. All right, well, appreciate everyone coming out. Let me actually move the chat over here so I don't have to keep looking over to my right. So, Clinton Parks is here, Fan-O-Matic, Larry Harris, Al Red Sox fan. Thanks for showing up, guys. We won't be here too much longer. I was kind of hoping to get a bunch of our um, community members together and talk baseball, but for whatever reason, this, that, and the other thing, busy schedules. A lot of people couldn't make it here tonight, so I'm going to do the wrap-up show by myself. So if you guys have any thoughts, questions, comments, be sure to put them in there. I'll be watching and hopefully be able to answer your questions for you. I got to get my glasses on so I can see everything. All right, so obviously this is the baseball wrap-up show for the 2019 baseball season. What a season it was. We did an episode just about at the end of every month and got to review and talk about what had happened. Uh, so we'll talk about some of that. We'll talk about the playoffs coming up. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly coming up with some of the teams. And we'll go from there, right? So let me actually slide this over to the other side so I can see a few things. All right. There we go. So I hope everyone's having a great night. So let's talk some baseball action here, right? So what do we think about the 2019 season in a whole? If you watched back in April when we did the end of the review show in the end of April, I was very excited about the start of the season. A lot of teams that were supposed to be not very good were doing pretty well for the season, and I thought, well, that those teams are gonna give it a ride and hopefully, stay in the race for a little bit longer. It's game one. Game 162 was tonight, and of course, I'm refreshing my screen. So give me a second here. If you're typing in the chat, just hang on a second. Um, Game 162 was today actually, and it was kind of anticlimactic to be honest. This whole two wild card teams um, in the American League and the National League were supposed to bring in more interest towards the end of the season. Um, keep more teams in it to the end, and I just didn't think it did. To be honest, I thought the regular season started off well and was pretty exciting up until about the halfway point. The All Star game, and then it kind of settled down into just the best teams took a step forward. There was hardly any teams kind of there was 4 or 5 teams in the National League and 3 in the American League, and that's kind of it was Cleveland, Tampa Bay, and Oakland were kind of vying there. Boston kept in it for a little while, but not as long as most people thought they would. So it's kind of really anticlimactic. Uh, you know, you only have 3 teams in it in the American League for the last couple weeks: Cleveland and Tampa Bay and Oakland, and it didn't really change much from there. It was kind of stayed that for a long time. Uh, last at least last month, maybe last 2 months of the season, seemed like it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. I think in our last end of the month review in June or July or whatever it was, I was like, it's a 3-team race in the American League. Cleveland, Tampa Bay, and Oakland, and 2 of those 3 teams are going to be in. So I just think it was kind of anticlimactic, really. The 2 wild cards were supposed to, like I said, kind of keep more teams in it because you give that extra spot, more vying and everything like that, more games, more meaningful games being played. I didn't see any meaningful games, to be honest. No, I think we did one. I'm pretty sure we did one at the end of June or July. I know we did one in June or July, Larry. I'm pretty sure we did. The National League, the National League, it was interesting because it came down to obviously game 162, where it was either the Cardinals or the Brewers were going to be winning the division, and the other team was already going to be in a wild card. So that was kind of anticlimactic too, because both of those two teams were going to make it. It was just one was going to be the division winner, and the other one was going to be the wild card team. So we knew which two teams was going to be there. It's just a matter of one's going to win the division, the other one's going to be a wild card team, and so that was kind of anticlimactic, and it didn't even look like it was going to be a race until Milwaukee won like 20 of their last 24 games and then made it really close. And the Cardinals almost decided to, give up on the division and not win it. But fortunately, Colorado came back in the ninth inning on Saturday night, down 2-1, and got a home run in the bottom of the ninth to tie it against Hader. I think I heard something like Milwaukee was like 57-4, leading going in the ninth inning. If they had the lead, they were like 57 wins and only 4 losses. But for somehow, some way, Colorado won that game. And then, of course, today the Cardinals finished it off. So the playoffs have been set, but I think it was kind of an anticlimactic season towards the end. It wasn't like, 2011 or even like last season seemed like it was a little more interesting towards coming down to the wire. What do you guys think about that? What do you guys think? Was it, do you think there was some suspense coming down the wire? Like I said, the fact that we knew with the teams that were there was just the standings. There wasn't like 5 teams vying for 2 spots. It was 3 for 2 spots, which is, and it wasn't even really that third team was out of it the last week. It didn't have much of a chance. They kept talking about the Mets, but the Mets are like 4.5, 5 games back, so they needed like to win out, and they needed the Nationals to lose out. So I don't even count that as really a consideration. Hey, Philip Reynolds, how you doing, my friend? Thanks for coming on by. I appreciate it. So anticlimactic, I think the season started well. The middle of the season went, it's a long season. I can't believe, we were doing this April, May, June, July, and we got to the halfway point, and I was like, oh, we still got another half a season to go. But I'll tell you what, I feel like August and September flew by. It's like, I can't even believe it was 2 months. Really, it was crazy fast, those 2 months. It was 50 games to go in the season. Oh yeah, plenty of time, and then before you know it, it's like 20 games left in the season. Oh yeah, still plenty of time. Oh yeah, and then it was all of a sudden like 3 games left. It was like crazy where it did. Al says, I kind of agree with what Al said. After the All-Star break, it was like the cream of the crop just rose to the top. We didn't have, you know, we didn't have any teams that were doing things like, losing 8 of 10 games and, taking their division lead from like 10 games down to 2 games. There was only one division that did that, and it was Minnesota had a good 12.5 game lead there. Cleveland made a big run on them, and I think they got to as close as like 3.5 or maybe even 2.5 behind. And everybody's like, "Oh, here comes Cleveland! Watch out! Watch out! Watch out!" But I wasn't worried at all because baseball is a game of peaks and valleys, ups and downs. And if you have a game, have a team that goes, on a hot streak, they win 18 of 20 or 20 of 22 or whatever. Law of averages in baseball says, okay, you do that, then you're going to lose, 5 of the next 10. You're not going to continue on that hot streak. So baseball is a law of averages, I think, with you know, teams aren't going to win 120, 130 games a season. You know, you're lucky if you win 90, or you're really good if you win 100, and that's only 20 games up. So, Tribe Fan 879, good evening, my friend. Yep, we're going to talk about that Phantomatic. Phantomatic says, I can't believe how many home runs were hit this year. Here's Cleveland actually took over first half game lead in earlier mid-August. I don't recall that. Maybe they did there for a little while. Um, but again, when you start really low, and 12, 15 games out, and then you make a run at it, law of averages in baseball says, law and average in baseball says you're at the peak, now you're going to go to the valley. So everything in baseball seems to work out. So yep, the Twins righted the ship, and the Tribe couldn't keep up that pace, says Al, Red Sox fan. All right, so that's kind of my overview. Let's talk about going into the 2019 season, the teams I had picked, and for those of you that were part of our preview show back in March, you can kind of compare and see how well you did. So in the American League East, I had the Yankees. And I didn't think the Red Sox were going to have a good year. It seems like the Red Sox have a good year, and then a bad year, and a good year, and then a bad year. Since they won the World Series last year, it was probably time for them to not have a good season. So I picked the Yankees, thinking they were going to do well. And the American League Central Division, I picked the Twins because I didn't think Cleveland still had it in them. They're kind of on the cusp of doing really, really well, and then it seems like all teams that are on the cusp doing really, really well for 3 or 4 seasons, and they put all their energy and effort and money into that. And then after 3 or 4 seasons, they have a down season. I thought the Cleveland was going to have a down season, which it did. Uh, and so I picked Minnesota, so 2 for 2 so far. And in the American League West, I picked the Astros. I think I even had the Astros going to the World Series, which we're going to talk about here coming up. In our, later on in the show, we're going to talk about, playoff predictions here. So 3 for 3 for divisions. For the wild card, I'm trying to remember who I actually had in the wild card. I think I had Cleveland and Tampa Bay. So one of the two teams I didn't have. I thought I had Cleveland. I thought Cleveland was still going to be, decent enough to get in the playoffs. And I've been a believer in Tampa Bay since the start of the season. You go back and watch these episodes. I kept on baseball demos. And by the way, has anybody heard or seen from baseball demos? It's been a while since I've actually seen him post any messages or videos. I want to make sure everything's okay with baseball demos because we miss him and we want him back, and just wanting to see if anybody knows anything about him. So I kept telling baseball demos he was not a believer in the Rays, and I kept telling him, when are the Rays going to go away? They've been good all season, and so I think I had Cleveland and the Rays in there. I didn't think Oakland was going to be as good as they were, so Oakland was kind of a surprise for me. You always have these low market teams. They have a season where they make the playoffs, they surprise everyone, and then they take a step back. So good for Oakland. Kudos to those of you out there who picked Oakland to do well this season, because even though they are a small market team, they stepped up and had a second consecutive good season. Now they're in a really tough division, probably in the division with the best team in baseball right now, the Astros. So chances of them winning the division were pretty slim, but still a very good season for Oakland. I didn't think they were going to have it in them. I thought Cleveland would win out all, if it came down to it. But I was pretty close. Cleveland just faltered towards the end. They got off to a really bad start. They could never make the ground up. When they finally made the ground up, the baseball god said, "Okay, well, you won 25 of 30, so now you're going to have to lose 20 of 30." So, law of averages in baseball. Um, so let's go. Let's talk about the National League. So in the National League in the East, I had the Washington Nationals winning it, and I had the Chicago Cubs in the Central Division, and I had the Dodgers winning their division. So unfortunately, I was only 1 for 3 in the National League. And for the wild card, I had the Cardinals and the Mets. So I actually had St. Louis hosting the Mets in the wild card, which almost, the Mets came pretty darn close. They made a run. They were in it pretty good after the terrible. I mean, go back and watch our episodes from May and June where Washington and the Mets were getting hammered by talk radio, by the sports community, by everyone out there. And for those two teams to be pretty close at the end of the season is kudos to them. Um, yeah, I had quite a few of those teams in the playoffs. So how did you guys do in your preseason picks? So next year when we do our 2020 preview show, I want to get more people involved, and I want to have more, something in writing so we can, kind of, I can print out sheets and I can hold them up and say, okay, here's what Tribe Fan 879, here's his picks, and here's Larry Harris's picks, and here's Fanomatic's picks, and here's Al Red Sox fan picks, so we can compare and see who did the best at the end of next baseball season, which is what I was kind of hoping to do this season. But we will work towards that, right? Uh, Mets were 46 and 26 in the second half, says Fanomatic. Yeah, I mean there was some definite teams. I mean the Cardinals had a second half, like it wasn't for their second half. Um, I think at the All-Star break, I think the Cubs were 1 or 2 games up on the Cardinals, and Milwaukee was right there. It's been, I think everyone predicted the National League Central Division to be the toughest between Milwaukee and the Cubs and the Cardinals. It's kind of a pick 'em there because any one of them could have pulled it out, could have done well. Um, uh, Demos was perfect in the American League, even the 2 wildcard teams. So baseball Demos, wow, he was perfect in the American League. So good for him. Good for baseball Demos. Congrats to him. Al Red Sox fan, I picked the Red Sox to win the World Series every year since 1976. Well, you were right last year. So there you go. You're 50%, right? uh, So what's your predictions of the World Series? We're going to get to that, Philip. We're going to get to that, my friend. We're not going to get to the end until we get to the end. I'll give you my picks. And I'm actually going to get all you guys involved in it as well. I'm going to force you guys to be involved in it. All right? I'm going to force you guys to be involved in it because we're going to have a little competition with the reward at the end. So, Tribe Fan 879, Al Red Sox fan, Philip Reynolds, Larry Harris, all you guys out there, Ken Castro, APBA Chatter, whoever, we are going to have a competition for a prize at the end of this wild card or the playoffs here. So, big announcement for that. Well, let's just go ahead and tell you guys now so you can start thinking about it. So, first playoff game is Tuesday night. Tonight's Sunday, so Tuesday night. What do you have to do? All you have to do is email me your picks for who's going to win all of the playoff games And then for your World Series, for the World Series, you need to tell me who's going to win it and how many games. So you have to pick all the games, including the playoff games, the division rounds, the championship rounds, the World Series, and then the winner of the World Series and how many games. If you get it all right, all of it right, I'm going to buy you a 2019 baseball season from whatever game you like to play, whether that's APA, Stratomatic, uh, uh, payoff pitch, whoever. If you get it all right, including how many games in the World Series they win, then you get a free copy. Now, if we have multiple people do it, I'm going to have a drawing. Only one person is going to win. One person is going to win. But if you get it all right, including the playoffs, championship series, or the division series, the championship series, the World Series, and you tell me how many games they're going to win it in, and if you're 100% right, you're going to get yourself a free copy of 2019 season, either payoff pitch, Stratomatic, APA, whatever. I'm buying it for you. So there you go. And if it comes down to several people that looks like they're going to be correct, we're going to have a tiebreaker probably, going into the last game. It'll be pick the final score. Whoever picks the final score the closest will win the prize. But it sounds easier than it's going to be. I'm telling you, it's going to sound easier than it's going to be. Hopefully, but that'll give you guys a chance to get in on this. All you have to do, email me at idjesterlive@gmail.com. idjesterlive@gmail.com. You have until 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday night. Once the baseball starts, you're out. If you don't get it to me, if you get it to me at 7:01, you're out. 7 o'clock. I've given you 2 days to basically decide who you want. And you better be specific in who's going to win each of the games, because if there's any question, I'm just going to say you're out. So you got to tell me this team's going to win the wild card game. They're going to play against, for example, let's look at the American League. It's going to be Oakland and Tampa Bay. The winner of that's going to play the Astros. So if you pick Oakland and then you pick the Astros, you better tell me the Astros are going to beat Oakland. So I know that for sure. If you're not specific, I'm not. It's up to you to make sure that I know what you're doing with your brackets. If in fact you can print out a bracket and just fill your little teams on it, and then send me a screenshot of that to idjesterlive@gmail.com. So just make sure there's no confusion or anything like that. So that way, we'll see, at the end of the playoffs, we'll see who had the closest. And if somebody gets it 100% perfect, they get themselves a free season, because you are the 2019 master. idjesterlive@gmail.com. So looking forward to that. All right, so let's talk about the season real quick. We'll talk about that for a little bit, and then we'll talk about the upcoming playoffs. I'll give you my picks of what I think is going to happen. If I'm 100% accurate, then I guess I get to buy myself something. So that's pretty cool. I'll take that, right? I'll take that. So there you go. So that, if somebody can pick them all out, then you're the 2019 baseball master. You deserve something. So hopefully somebody in our community out there, you have till 7 o'clock Tuesday night. IDJester Live, no spaces, all one word. IDjesterlive@gmail.com. Just email me your picks. Make sure you're specific on who's winning, which spot, World Series, and again, how many games is it going to take them to win it in the World Series? So if you pick, the Cardinals over Oakland in the World Series in 5 games, I got to know that in 5 games. Playoffs? You talking playoffs? Playoffs? Larry Harris. All right, so let's talk about the season. As I already said, it was kind of an up and down season for, it started, I thought it started really good. You know, we knew some of these teams weren't going to be good until the end, but I thought a lot more teams would stay in it to a lot longer than they did. We've got some really kind of poor teams out there between Detroit. Detroit in the end of April, I mean, they were only a few games back, but, they end up, how many games did they end up back now? It's like crazy how many games back they are, and yeah, Detroit ended up 47 and 113. So winning percentage of 294 for Detroit. But if you look at the end of April, the end of April, Detroit was 13 and 14. So they were one game under 500 at the end of 1 month. So that's what I'm talking about is, you have these teams that they're in it for a month, maybe 2, and then they fell off the face of the earth. And as Al Red Sox fan said earlier, I mean, the cream of the cream rise to the top is for sure as, the teams really started separating them. The other thing that was kind of disappointing in this season, and I don't recall it being this way as much as it was this season, and you guys let me know what you think. In the American League, the Yankees won by 7 games. The Minnesota Twins won by 8 games, and the Astros won by 9 games. So none of the divisions in the American League weren't even close. Now, of course, we know the National League came down to a 1-game playoff, so that was close in the Central Division. But I think the Dodgers won by double digits, and the Braves ended up. What did the Braves end up? I'm not sure why my stupid computer is acting up like this, but I can't refresh my boxes. I'm getting very aggravated with it. Anywho, yeah. Larry Harris says Detroit won another 34 games for the rest of the season after April. So that is really disappointing. And okay, let's click on National League now. There you go. Braves only won by 4. Okay. Right. Well, that's because they tanked, right? Because they had their division wrapped up. They knew they couldn't catch the Dodgers, so the last 2 weeks of the season they didn't even do anything. So no, the Braves won by 8 in their division, 8 over the Nationals. 90 and 72. The Nationals were 82 and 80. So 8 games there. Larry, are you looking at the wrong stats? Or am I looking at the wrong stats? I'm looking at the wrong stats. Excuse-moi. That's because my computer is just acting up. You're right. Let's see. Five games. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong season. I was looking at the last 2018. But you're all right. Yeah, so they dropped it to 4 games. All right. So Baseball Reference hasn't been updated yet. They must have won today. Maybe it was a late game, so they don't have it in the system yet. But yeah, it was it just felt like it was gonna be, it was one of those things where it looked like it was gonna be a really great season, right? It looked like it had the, you know, epic start, and it was just going to continue, and it was just going to be, down to the wire. There's going to be 10 teams vying for the playoffs, and it's going to come down to the last day like it did in 2011, and everyone was going to be so excited. But oh my God, it was like the All-Star break hit, and bam, like every team out there just hit a brick wall, and then all the other teams, the good teams, just went, okay, we'll just keep winning, and you guys just keep losing, and we'll win the division by 10 games or 9 games or whatever. It was crazy, crazy good. Um, it just seemed like the second half of the season went by so fast because there just wasn't, for me, just didn't seem like there was anything going on with it. I mean, you had these division leads, and then it'd go up a game or maybe 2 games. They'd be 6 games back, 4 games back. Then they go to 6, then they go to 4, then they go to 6, then they go to 4. But it never came down to like a team really making push. Except there is an exception. We got to give the tribe fan and his team credit. They made a serious run at Minnesota there. Uh, so that was the exception. But besides that, I mean, it just seems like the Yankees got out and they were winning by 10 games all season long, it looked like. I mean, it looked like the Yankees at the end of April. Let's just look at, let's see, the American League here. It just seemed like the Yankees were out 10-game lead, and they just held that the whole season. The Astros, they were 10 games up, and they just held that the whole season. The Dodgers, they were up 10, 15 games the whole freaking season. The Braves were up 5 to 10 games the whole season. It seemed like it was just the whole season was just those 4 or 5 teams that just were 10 games up, and they just stayed 10 games up the whole season. So it was kind of a little bit anticlimactic for me. So let's talk about things we remember about the season. Obviously, Tyler Skaggs, kind of when you have something tragic like that happens, it's going to obviously stand out for the bad, I guess. I kind of thought that might inspire LA Angels a little bit, kind of rally their team and stuff, and they did for like a week or two, and then they kind of faltered past by the wayside as well. There was just didn't seem like anyone. Let's see if we go to Yankees. Yeah. In some of these divisions that were won by 7 or 8 games or whatever, I don't know what the Yankees' record the last 2 weeks of the season, but when you're 10 games up, you don't really have much to play for other than trying to get the number 1 seed, which I don't think the Yankees were really trying to get the number 1 seed. The Yanks did that with one player dropping after another. That is a good point, Rick. Thanks for joining us tonight. I do appreciate it. The Yankees obviously had a steamroll of players that just got injury after injury after injury. And you thought, oh well, they're not going to be able to stay in this very long. All right, so we're going to go to the last day of April, and we're going to look at the standings at the last day of April, shall we? So after 1 month, American League East was actually Tampa Bay had the lead over the Yankees by 2.5 games. In the Central Division, Minnesota was up by 1.5. In the West, Houston was up by 1. And the National League, Philadelphia was up by 1 over the Mets. St. Louis was up 3.5, or I'm sorry, 3 against Chicago, and the Dodgers were up 2. So it was all pretty close after 1 month, right? And then we go on to let's Let's go to the end of May and see where everything laid at the end of May. Yeah. The Yanks' goal the last 10 games is to stay healthy. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, if you got a 10-game lead with 10 to play, it's just like, okay, let's just not play anything, put in all the scrubs, rest all of our good pitchers. Give them work, but take them out after an inning or 2 innings or whatever. Nothing hard though. Just bare minimum, basically. The Braves were kind of the same way. The Braves just seemed like they were just in retreat mode. They just didn't seem like they cared anymore. They knew where they were going. They were in the playoffs. They had a 8-game lead or 10-game lead or whatever it was, and then it's like, well, let's just play not to get hurt. And let's see where everything was at the end of June. Let's try June and see what happened at the end of June. But the Brewers and Cubs had a pennant race. Yeah, it technically was, but it shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been. Um, it shouldn't have been that much. It shouldn't have been even that close. The Cardinals are basically packing it in because you're going to win the division. So it shouldn't even been. I mean, they lost 4 or 5 in a row going into today. So all they had to do was win one of those games, and they would have been division champions. But no, they wanted to wait till the last day. Al Red Sox fan, take care, man. All right. Brewers made a mad dash. Yeah, yep. Brewers, they 20 out of the last 24, I think it was, something like that. Very, very, very good. All right, so let's look at the end of June and compare that to what we had in the end of April. So end of June, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It seemed like the first month, maybe the first 2 months were really good. Everything was nice and tight. Everyone is in the race. It was interesting. I was watching games of the Seattle Mariners being played because they were in the race, and I wanted to see how well they could, keep it in. At the end of June, Yankees 7-game lead. Central Division, Minnesota 8-game lead. In the West, Houston 7-game lead. In the National League, Atlanta 6-game lead. In the National League Central was tied between Chicago and Milwaukee, and then the Dodgers had a 12-game lead. So that's kind of what happened. Except for the National League Central Division, that's exactly how things ended up at the end of the season. So July, August, September, that's what I was talking about. It's just kind of dead to me. Just nothing changed. It was all the same. The teams that had this lead in June had the lead in July, had the lead in August, had the lead in September. They held on to the end, and it was over before you know it. So kind of anticlimactic, but I think the first 2 months were really interesting. Um, with we have some managerial changes that were announced today. Bruce Bochy retiring now, so he's out. When you look back at Bruce Bochy, he won these championships for San Francisco. I think 2010, I think everyone kind of thought that they were going to win, but they didn't think in 2012 they were going to win. And they didn't think in 2014 they were going to win. So you got to give Bruce Bochy a little bit of credit. I think a manager of all sports out there, I think a manager in baseball is worth probably 10 to 15 games a season. And if you only lose the division by 6 or 8 games, I think a manager can change that, right? I think a manager, if you were to take your team and lose by 6 games, you change manager. I think a good manager, what I'm saying, not just average manager. I'm talking about a good manager is worth at least 10 to 15 extra wins for your team, and that's going to take you from a second place team up to winning your division, or give you a better seed in the playoffs or whatever. So um, losing Yelich really hurt the Brew Crew. I totally agree with that. But every team out there lost players this season. I mean, every single. I mean, Correa for Houston's been out most of the season. The Cardinals, they've had injuries to some of their main players. A couple of their players, Yachty was down for a month with a thumb injury. I think every team has injuries, so you can't just say, well, we lost because Yelich wasn't there the last 2 weeks of the season. Well, you know, I could say the same thing about the Cardinals. Well, the Cardinals wouldn't have lost all those games in June if Yachty or Molina was there. So it kind of, I don't like the injury. I think teams that have a lot of injuries and can overcome them, that's great because it shows they have depth and they have some, they have good backup players and they have depth in their organization in the minor leagues and all that. They think these are the teams that you think, okay, they're going to be good for a couple more years. If they lose a player or two for free agency or trades or whatever, they have all these backup players that we know did really well. So I think they'll still be good. So Yankees, I'm thinking, next year, looks like it. If all goes well, it might be another Yankees year. Who knows? Right at this point, but um, I think I think the season was kind of ebb and flow. Was kind of good start. It got to like the halfway point, and then everything was the same the other half of the season. It just seemed like, except for the National League Central Division, which kind of flip flop back and forth based on Cardinals would win a few, and then the Cubs would win a few, and then Milwaukee would win a few, and those three teams were kind of vying for it for a long time, and then Milwaukee fell back because they lost a bunch of games and then they won a bunch of games and climbed right back into it. But then baseball averages everything out, so then they started losing a few more at the end, which gave the Cardinals the division. So uh, I think it's all in all, I would say it's probably just a C. If I was going to give it a grade, maybe a C or C plus. Home runs. Let's talk about home runs. Wow, what about? I don't know. I haven't found out the total of home runs, but I know there was a lot of home runs, record pace. I know we've been watching that all season long. I know the Minnesota Twins have I think they had 307 home runs, which, if you think about it, is an average of almost 2 home runs per game. So every single game they played, they had at least 2 home runs, or on average 2 home runs. It's like crazy. So I think they're going to be adjusting the baseball, you know, in the off season to give it more, not as hard, make it a little more soft or spongy or whatever they do to it to make it less streamlined so it doesn't fly out as much. So that begs the question, in 10 years from now when we look back at 2019 and all these home run records that we have, does anyone put a big asterisk next to it and say, oh no, we can't count those because the ball was different back in 2019? Just like they did with the steroid era, now all the players that have these records have a little asterisk next to them because they were using controlled substances and all that. But record number of home runs and batters striking out, says Rick. Yeah, yeah. I knew we were on a record pace. I just can't believe Minnesota 307 home runs, 2 home runs per game on average, which means a game that they don't hit a home run means that they're hitting like 4 or 5 in another game. So that is crazy when you think about it. Just how many home runs. And I think baseball will do something about that. I think they should do something about that. I don't think they should asterisk any of the records that happen. We're talking about positive things. Let's talk about Pete Alonso. I mean, rookie comes in and hits 53 home runs. Holy cow! And that's kind of what I think about baseball is everyone going into the season has the lineups and what they think is going to happen, just like we all do. Oh, my team's going to be good this year or bad this year or whatever it happens. And then you have these events that happen where people come out of nowhere and have great seasons, and those teams that have these people that have good seasons really make good strides. So if you look at the Cardinals, I mean, just Harrison Bader and Edman for the Cardinals. I mean, if you would have asked me who Harrison Bader and Edman were at the beginning of the season, I'd have been like, I don't know, there's some infield dudes. I didn't know anything about them. These two guys, man, like they helped carry the Cardinals. I mean, they weren't all stars, obviously, but they were um, really good support that we weren't counting on as Cardinal fans going into the season. So all that. So that's why I think the Mets, a lot of people at the beginning of the season counted the Mets out. I would think I was the only one that had the Mets going in the playoffs. Now I ended up being wrong, but the reason the Mets almost made the playoffs and just fell a little bit short was the fact that Pete Alonso came out of nowhere because nobody mentioned Pete Alonso's name going into our preview show. So him stepping up is something you don't count on. And all of a sudden you get 4 or 5 or 6 wins because of this player that's having a great, this rookie that comes on the scene and helps her team out. All right. So what are we looking at here? I can't see that. So let's talk. I guess let's talk about the playoffs. Going into the playoffs here. So going into the playoffs, I saw a stat on MLB today that for the first time in MLB history, um, one team had the fewest strikeouts, and also their pitchers had thrown the most strikeouts. So, first time in Major League Baseball history, a team led fewest strikeouts for their batters and most strikeouts thrown by their pitchers. Does anybody know which team that might be? If you do, let me know in the chat. I'll give you a second to think about that. So their hitters struck out the least, and their pitchers threw the most strikeouts for their team. First time in MLB history, I was like, wow, I did not know that was never done before. You baseball historians out there, you guys should know all this. I don't know any of this stuff. I don't know any of this stuff. You talk about pre-1970, I don't know nothing about it. Rick says Houston, question mark. And Rick is a brilliant man, and it is the Houston Astros. The Houston Astros, fewest strikeouts by their batters, and their pitchers threw the most strikeouts. So it looks like, we've been talking about the Astros being a powerhouse team most of the season, and, well, they definitely have it to show for. So let's see, what else do we want to talk about going into the playoffs? What else do we want to talk about? I had a whole bunch of things, and now my mind's blank because the stupid computer keeps won't go to the right pages I wanted to go to. There's something wrong with my browser, I think. I might have to uninstall it, reinstall it, or whatever. But yeah. It's pretty sad, when you have in the American League, you have one team that's 49 games out, you have another team that's 53 games out, and you have another team that's 39 games out. That is like really bad seasons. Really bad. So in the American League, it's definitely you either have or you have not in the American League. There's like 6 good teams, and the rest of the teams are just. There is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 15 teams, 15 teams in the American League. 9 of those 15 teams were 20 games back of the division winner. Is that not crazy? Does that not like make people wonder what's going on? Holy crap. 9 teams that are at least 20 games back. I mean, I don't know if you go back to 2018, is that normal? I don't think so. Let's look at the American League in 2018. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You only had 7 in 2018. So I think 9. I was thinking 9 was pretty high. But it definitely shows you what I was talking about. You're either a have or a have not in the American League for sure. And the National League, it's a little bit more blurry because there's a kind of a lot of teams that are above average and vying for those positions that are just slightly above average. In the American League, you're either a have or have not, especially this year. 9 teams with at least 20 games behind the division leader this year, as opposed to 7, only 7 last year. So one of the things going into this season, I said, was that on average, half of your teams don't make the playoffs the next season. On average, like half your teams don't make it. This year, from 2018 to 2019, you only had 2 teams in the American League 2 of the 6 that didn't make it, that made it the previous season. So Boston's out, Cleveland's out. And the 2 teams that made it this year for those 2 teams are Oakland and Tampa Bay, actually the 2 wild card teams. No, I'm sorry, Minnesota and Tampa Bay. Sorry, Minnesota and Tampa Bay, not Oakland. So in the American League, it's obviously, not much of a change. We look at the National League. On the National League, of the 6 teams that made it last year, again, only 2 teams didn't make it that made it last year. And those 2 teams are Colorado and who was the other team? Colorado and who? God, I forgot already. I looked at this earlier, and now my brain is drawing a blank. Who is not in it this year that was in it last year? Hey now. Colorado and who? Who is it? Gosh. I gotta wait for my browser to load. Come on, you. Colorado and Colorado and the Cubs, of course. Colorado and Chicago are out this year, and the Cubs. Johnny got it. You're right. I thought of it just as you were posting it. You were probably thinking the same thing. So it was Colorado and the Cubs in 2018. They're out this year. Replacing them is going to be the Cardinals and the Washington Nationals. So we only had 2 teams from the American League that bowed out and 2 teams from the National League. And it's a little bit lower than normal. I think, like I said, on average, you have 3 teams back from the previous season, but you also get 3 new teams. This year, there was only 2 new teams from each side. So it should. So it looks like we have a lot of the same teams that we had last year. So that can either be really good or really bad, depending on your feeling of baseball. So we got the. Let's talk about the American League wild card. Let's talk playoffs now. American League wild card. Tampa Bay and Oakland. Tampa Bay and Oakland. Oakland is going to be at home. They got the record advantage against Tampa Bay. So they get the home field advantage. Is that going to make a difference? Oakland, for me, I think is one of those teams. I think Oakland is a solid team. They did a lot better, as I mentioned earlier. They did a lot better this season than I thought they would. I thought they were going to, being a smaller market team, unless they did everything right again, they were probably going to take a step back. But kudos to Oakland. They got some decent players there. They did enough to make it there, and they did enough to keep it going. So um, I think so. If you're looking at the Oakland Tampa Bay series, I think Oakland is, for me, and this might just be my opinion. Obviously, it's my opinion, but it's just my view of Oakland. Oakland's one of those teams that they're kind of streaky, where they'll win like 3 or 4 in a row, and everybody thinks they're great, and then they'll have a couple down games. Then they'll do really good, and then they'll have a couple down games. Then they'll do really good, and they'll have a couple down games. So it's kind of, for me, Oakland is like they're like a toss up. You don't know if you're going to get, the really good team that's going to show up, or you're going to get the really bad team. As opposed to Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is one of these teams. It's like the tortoise and the hare. Everyone knows the tortoise and the hare legend, right? You get the tortoise, you get the hare that runs out in front, and then he takes a break and doesn't do anything for a while, and the hare just trugs along, does his little thing, and is pretty consistent. And then the rabbit sees him coming, and he takes off and runs, and then he rests again. And then the tortoise, he just does his little thing, slowly but surely, makes his way, keeps it going, keeps it going. I think that's where we're at in this matchup in the wild card game. I think. I think it's Oakland. You don't know if you're going to get the A the A team or the B team. Get it? The Oakland A team or the Oakland B? Yeah, okay. You don't know if you're going to get like that super good hot team that's going to be awesome, or you're going to get the team that's not. So I'm going to take the upset, I think, in this one, and I'm going to go with the slow, steady, and I'm not being a homer here, but I'm going to take the slow and steady Tampa Bay Rays to upset Oakland in Oakland and take that game. So I just you want to bet on Oakland. I think you're lose. Like I said, Oakland is a powerhouse team, and they could win 8-0, no doubt about it. But I don't have the confidence that the A team is going to show up for the A's. It might be the B team. So I think I'm going to go with Tampa Bay over Oakland in the uh, the playoffs. So that means it's going to be Tampa Bay and the Astros in the division series. 5 game series, short series. It could be, it could go one way or the other. In a short series, get a couple upsets, and then all of a sudden one team knocks out the other one. But the Astros have been, for me, the most solid team all season long. They picked up Greinke at the trade deadline, which just solidifies their. The funny thing is, Zach Greinke. Everyone knew that Zach Greinke was probably gone, and nobody knew. They were talking about maybe to Philadelphia. They were talking about maybe to Tampa. All these different teams. Nobody ever mentioned the Astros. Then all of a sudden, bam! Like last day, signing, boom, sign Greinke out of nowhere. It's like, and all the other teams out there, the Yankees and everyone else had their jaws like, wait, what? Wait, they can't do that. Oh, yes, they can because they did. So I think the Astros are, uh, I think they are, as we talked about earlier, pitchers have the most strikeouts or batters struck out the least. Those are the two things in baseball right now that make you the best team in the league, and they did both of those things. They're number one in both categories. So I think the Astros are going to take Tampa Bay. I hope Tampa Bay can at least win 1 or 2 to make it respectable, but I really think the Astros probably in 4. I think Tampa Bay is going to win think they might win one. I could be, like I said, going into this, you don't know anything, but I think the Astros are they might even sweep them, but I'm hoping Tampa Bay wins one. For the other division series, it means it's the Yankees and the Twins. And what a series this is going to be. I know that our good friend out there, Sports Time Machine, big Yankees fan. He's a big Yankees fan. And he was hoping they would get to play the Twins because of their recent history of beating the Twins down. The playoffs in 2017, they in the wild card game they knocked off Minnesota, and I think Minnesota since 2001 was like 0-5 against the Yankees in different series. I think is what I remember hearing on the radio or whatever it was. So that puts the Yankees against Minnesota. Minnesota, um, they're a small market team, but they got the most home runs. But the Yankees are not far behind. I think at one point, just a week ago, it looked like the Yankees were going to reach the 300 mark before the Twins, but I don't think they did. I think Minnesota ended up getting there first. I don't know how many home runs the Yankees hit. Let's see if it will tell us yet. Might not even be updated, but if we look at it, let's see. Uh, oh my God, seriously, now you're going to refresh just as I'm going to look at the. Okay, so I got to wait for it to refresh, but so Milwaukee, sorry, Minnesota and the Yankees. Yankees, I think, they got the injury bug all season long. Yanks had 305 going in today. Okay, so I think they were just a couple back then. So they did reach 300. Um, um, so I think it's going to be a pretty good matchup. So with giving up that many home runs, it's going to come down to who can prevent the more home runs against the other team. And I think he. This is almost another one of these ones where it's a coin flip. Who do you take? The Yankees rotation is not great, but their bullpen is really good. The Twins starting pitching's pretty decent, but their bullpen isn't great, so it's kind of a contrast there. Which one do you think is going to give up the least amount of home runs? Is it going to be the Yankee pitching or is it going to be the Twins pitching? And, I am really torn on who I should pick on this one because it's, like I said, it's kind of a coin flip. But I'm going to, I think I'm going to go with, I just don't want to, but I'm going to go with, I got to make a decision. Let's just make a decision. Let me think. Let me use my crystal ball here. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say the Twins are going to upset the Yankees. Yes, I am. I'm going to say it. I'm hoping not, but I think Minnesota is going to take it. I think they're going to win one in New York, and then I think they're going to win both at home because the crowd will be behind them. And so I'm going to go. Yanks had one home run today to give them 306. The Twins got 3 for 307. So I'm gonna go with the upset here. I'm going against everything out there. The history between the Yankees and the Twins. I'm going against the division winners, the better record. You're gonna have upsets. So this is gonna be my upset in the American League. It's gonna be the Twins beating the Yankees. And then it'll be Minnesota and the Astros in the championship series. And I think once Minnesota gets by the Yankees, they're going to be spent because they're going to put all their resources into doing that. I think Houston's going to have a much easier time getting by Tampa, so they're going to be a lot better rested. Their pitchers are going to be a lot better rested. And I think the Astros beat the Twins in 6 games to go to the World Series. All right, so let's talk National League. So we got the Nationals hosting the Brewers. Nationals hosting the Brewers, and that is, I think that's going to be, as I talked about in Al Red Sox live chat with Al. I think that is going to be the best matchup of all matchups in the National League. It's going to be that wild card game. So much is riding on that game. Milwaukee, so hard to get back in the playoffs, just to fall a little bit short. Milwaukee's such a good team. They have the best closer in the game right now. They have the good starting pitching. They have good hitters. Yelich being out is definitely going to help. But I've seen Washington. I told you guys that all the way back in March when we went over and watched some spring training games. I've seen the eye test with Washington. I knew they were a good team. They handled the Cardinals that day. They looked a much better team than the Cardinals the 2 days that I watched them. And I knew they were going to be a good team. And when they got off to such a poor start, I was like, I can't believe this. And so when we did our preview show way back when, I had the Nationals actually going to the World Series and playing the Astros. So Washington, Milwaukee, I think is a great matchup. It's Washington needs this game so badly because of all the seasons they haven't done anything. Now's their chance to do it. They made it in when nobody thought they were going to make it in the season. And now they got to face Milwaukee, the underdog that everyone loves to love, right? The underdog that everyone is rooting for. But I think without Yelich, I think Milwaukee's in for trouble. And I think the pitching for the Nationals are going to win that game. So the Nationals win and go face the Dodgers. The other matchup, obviously, is Braves and Cardinals. So come back to them after we talk about Dodgers Nationals. So as I just mentioned, I had Washington going to the World Series in my preview show. So for them to go to the preview show, I was thinking they were better than the Dodgers and the Cardinals and the Braves and everyone else in the division. And now the Nationals have to go up against the best team in the National League all season long, the powerhouse Los Angeles Dodgers that won their division by 15 games. They've been winning their division, seems like the whole season by 15 games. They didn't even have to put any effort into it, and they won by 15 games. They are a powerhouse team. They have the pitching, they have the hitting, they have the bullpen. Nothing can go wrong for them. But just wait a second, my friend. Just you wait a second. I'm picking the upset in this one. Again, I'm picking the upset. Washington over the Dodgers in 6 or 7 games. It's going to be a long series, but I think Washington starting pitching, I think is going to overcome. I think the Dodgers have a weakness, and their weakness is they haven't been put to the test all season long. They've had a 15-game lead all season long, so they haven't had any pressure on them. They've just been cruising right along. If Washington can win that first game, all of a sudden there's pressure on them. Then they start gripping the bats a little bit tighter. They start swinging at bad pitches. And yep, I'm going on the upset again. I think the Nationals with their pitching. I know their bullpen is awful. I know it. I know Baseball Demos is saying it right now to me. Oh my God, Jester, their bullpen is awful. That is true. Their bullpen is awful. And I don't know why I'm doing it, but you got to have upsets. It's not going to go. It's just like the NCAA basketball tournament, right? it doesn't go chalk, right? How many times have we ever got to the Final Four and it's all the number one teams are in the Final Four, right? Or even if you look at the other half of the bracket, right? How many times has it ever been 1-1 versus something else? Hardly ever. So I think, if I'm putting the number one seed in the American League, if I put the number one seed in the National League, why are we playing the rest of the games? So there's going to be upsets, and I think I'm going with the Nationals. I think, like I said, the Dodgers have their only weakness is they haven't been tested all season. They haven't been put against the rug. They haven't had to fight for scratch and crawl. They've been so good. And when you've been so good for so long, you kind of get out of routine of, oh shit, it's the bottom of the ninth inning and we're going to lose this unless we score 3 runs. And now that the playoffs are here, all of a sudden that's not just lose the game. It's like, oh well, if we lose this game, then we fall behind 2-0. So I'm going with the upset. I know I'm crazy. That's why but you gotta have some upsets, or else it's just gonna be one versus one for every season. Why do we even have playoffs? We might as well just say whoever has the best record in the National League plays the best team in the American League with the best record, and we just play a one game, and we'll be done with it, right? That gives us to our other, which is going to be Cardinals and Braves in the National League. Both teams are flawed, to say the least, but they are slightly better than average. They're not average teams. They're slightly better than average teams. They both won their divisions. I think I didn't even have the Braves going into the playoffs because I thought they were going to take a step back. So kudos to them. We love the Braves here in my house for all the things that they've done for my family, and just because they are a great organization with solid fan support. And it's really sad that the Cardinals and Braves, your two favorite teams in the National League, are facing off against one another, because what happens is you guarantee yourself at least somebody going to the next round, but you also guarantee yourself one of your two favorite teams is not going to the next round. And it's going to be a disappointment for one of these two teams. I think Atlanta, the Cardinals have been so up and down all season. We just talked about it a little bit ago. The Cardinals there at the end of June were 4 games back of the Cubs and Brewers, and then they had a great July and they were ahead by a game. And the Cardinals have been so streaky, up and down. I mean, look at their last 6 games of the season. They lost 2 to Arizona and 2 to the Cubs. So they 4-game losing streak, and if they would have lost today, we'd be in a playoff game tomorrow, and we wouldn't be having this show right now. Before that, they won like 6 in a row. So the Cardinals are, like, of all the teams in the playoffs, they're the streakiest team. So I don't think the Cardinals can keep it together in a 7-game series, because you have to win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one, right? The Cardinals are going to be like win, lose, 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 and then you're out. Boom, because you lost. And they can't stop that loss. I think the Cardinals are a step going in the right direction. They've finally made it back to the playoffs since 2015. First time they won the division in 4 years, and they finally made it to the playoffs. But I think they're going to be ousted by the Braves in the playoffs. It crushes my heart to say that, but it also makes me excited because the Braves at least have a chance to go on to the next round. So one of the two teams, one of my 2 National League teams, are going to go go on to the championship series. So that means it's going to be Washington, and for me, it's going to be Washington and Atlanta in the championship, National League Championship Series. And it's going to come down to, like it always does in the playoffs, I think pitching matchup favors, if you look at it, if you're going to take Atlanta's pitching or you're going to take Washington's pitching. You're going to take, starting pitching. You're going to take Washington's starting pitching. If you're going to take Washington's bullpen or you're going to take um, Atlanta's bullpen. You're going to take Atlanta's bullpen. So it really comes down to which offensive team do you think is going to do better? Is it going to be the Nationals offense or is it going to be Atlanta's offense? And I am going to say, and this is a tough decision, but unfortunately both of my two teams in the National League are going to get knocked out. And that's right. That's right. I'm saying it right here, right now. The wild card team, Nationals, go to the World Series to face off against the Astros. Astros, Nationals, World Series. I think Washington, if they can get on a roll, I think they can continue rolling. Their pitching's good enough. They got a good enough offense. I don't know if it'll happen, but that's going to be my prediction for the season. So that comes down to Washington and Houston in the World Series. In my preview show in March, I said, this is my words, I said the Nationals were going to surprise the world. They were going to lose Bryce Harper. They were going to go to the World Series and win it against the Astros. That was my prediction. But I'm not going to stick with that prediction right now because I have a redo. I can do over. I can change everything. And now I think the Astros are going to win their second World Series in 3 years. They're going to take out the Nationals in 5 games. I think the Nationals might take one. But I think it's going to be the Astros over the Nationals in 2019 season. And it's going to be a season to remember. But it does show the Nationals make the World Series without Bryce Harper. They gave that guy away. The Phillies now have all that money to spend to them for the next 10 years. And they made it to the World Series. Maybe the managers out there and the general managers and the owners will stop paying them all this big money, big contracts for these players when they don't deserve it and they don't need it, and all it does is handicap your team. And the Nationals are going to show you you can make the World Series without doing that. Be smart, sign good players to good contracts, and don't overextend yourself, and you can still get to the World Series. And there's my prediction. So there you go. I'll probably be 100% wrong. If you're going to Vegas this week, I would probably bet on everyone that I didn't pick because I usually am not right 100% of the time when it comes to predictions. But as we looked at earlier, I got all 3 of the National Leagues or the American League division winners right, and I got only 1 in the National League. So I don't know what that means, but in the year of the pitcher, it was the 2 best pitching teams, Cards and Tigers. In the year of the pitcher, it was the 2 best pitching teams, the Cards and Tigers. In the year of the homer, the Dodgers and Yankees seemed the most logical in the World Series. Logic says, here's what I hope for. Okay, this is what I hope for. I'm not predicting this, but this is what I hope for. I think Dodgers, Braves, Astros, Yankees. If those 2 matchups happen, it's going to be an epic championship series. I think both of them could go 7 games. I think baseball will be on the map. Everyone will be talking about it. And even though we're in football season, all the sports radio shows, everyone will be talking about it. If it's Astros, Yankees, Dodgers, and Braves, I think that'll be really good for baseball because those are the 4 best teams, the 4 biggest powerhouses going at it. And They have huge fan bases throughout the country. It'll inspire everyone. The ratings will be up, hopefully. It'll be a magical run. Those two series could be epic classes that people talk about for years and years to come. I don't think it's going to happen. As you can see by my predictions, it's going to be Twins, Astros, and Nationals, Braves. So those matchups won't happen. But I think if they do happen, I think that would be the best for baseball. I think it would be if you pick those four teams, you're picking on the four teams that should make it, the four best teams in the league. If you want the four best, pick those four, and you should be okay, as they are and have been since the All-Star break. These four have been the best teams in the league, and they have the best pitching, the best hitting, the best bullpens compared to all the other teams that are going into the playoffs. I I just know for myself, things never work out when you fill out a bracket 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. It never goes 1, 2, 3, 4 wins. And then 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3, and then 1 and 2 win. And then the 1 and 2 play in the finals. How many times has that ever happened in baseball history? I would love for someone to research that and find out. In the 118 years that we played with, or I don't even know how many seasons it's been we played with, 6, 12 teams on a side. I don't really count the wild card. So if you play with 4 teams on a side, you're talking best of 8. So best of 8, how many seasons in baseball has there been a best of, 8 teams made the playoffs, and it's come down to 1, 2, 3, 4 won, and then 1 and 2 won the next series, and then 1 beat number 2. How many times in 118 years of baseball history has that happened? I would love to know that. And I don't think, you go back in the 50s or before the 50s and the 60s, they only had like 2 teams making the playoffs. So that won't even count. I don't even know how many seasons we need Al Red Sox fan or Quentin Parks or somebody to tell us how many seasons there's been 8 teams in the playoffs, and how many times has it gone 1, 2, 3, and 4, beat 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then when 1, 2, 3, 4 played, how many times was it 1 beat 4, 2 beat 3, and it ended up being number 1 versus number 2 in the finals? I would love to know that. So I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it would be great for baseball if it did, but I don't think it's going to happen, and that's my reason why. So you have to pick some upsets. Just like when you pick your basketball brackets, you don't put all Final Four 1, 1, 1, 1 in there, right? I mean, one year we had like a 12th seed that came in there, right? So I'm thinking sooner or later, one of these teams has got to go. And look at 2011, right? 2011, what happened? St. Louis Cardinals, right? Wild card team wins the wild card, wins the division series, wins the championship series, goes to the World Series, and wins the World Series. So we know it can be done. So I'm picking the Nationals to make a run this year. I still believe in my Nationals. They might be my 3rd favorite team now. If they can show me well, if they get bow out on Wednesday and they get knocked out in the first round against Milwaukee, I'm going to be very disappointed, because that means I'm going to have a lot of wrong answers for you guys. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's the 2019 end of the season review show. If you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, we will see everyone. Again, if you want to be part of this, you have till 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday night. You're going to email me who's going to win every single series, including the wild card games, the division rounds, the championship series, who's going to win the World Series, and in how many games. And if you get it 100% right, and you're the only one, I'm going to buy you I'm going to buy you a free 2019 baseball card and dice season, whatever system that you choose, APBA, Stratomatic, Payoff Pitch, whatever. So if you're interested, email me IDJESTERlive, all one word, IDJESTERlive@gmail.com, and I'll have everyone's sheets printed out, and we'll have another show where I show everyone's sheet off so you can keep track of how you're doing compared to everyone else. We're only going to have one winner, though. So if it comes down to several people, 2 or 3 people that have all 100% right, then it'll come down to the last game, and we'll have like a tie. I'll email everyone, or we'll have a show talking about this ahead of time, and you'll pick like the final score. Whoever gets the final score the closest will win it. So I'm not sending out like 20 different guys' seasons. So you got one chance to get it, and if you get it and you get it all right, you could be the winner. Card and Dice 2019 season of your choice. All right, Johnny Smoke, Rick Query, and Al Red Sox fan, Tribe fan 879. Johnny Smoke, Larry Harris, Phil Reynolds. Oh, who else do we have here? Phanomatic. And Clinton Barks. All right, guys, that's it. I'm out of here. Thanks for coming. We'll have another stream coming up shortly, probably tomorrow or the next day, where we get to play some more APBA hockey, right? Game 1 is in the books. If you haven't watched it yet, what an epic game that was. You should definitely check it out. That's all I got to say. All right, guys, we'll see everyone very, very soon. Thanks for coming out tonight. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.